Hello everybody. My name is Mado and I'm here to talk about something that you might not know about, something totally new for English speakers. It's called a game in English, the garden for all manner of exchange. What is the game? The game is a way out of the incoming economic crisis that it is probably going to be hitting the whole planet in the next months or years to come. Why is it the perfect solution? Because you can organize the game wherever you want with any type of person, any age. All you need is a little bit of paper and a pencil. That's it. Now let me explain. First of all, let's talk a little bit about the history of exchange. You must have heard about barter before. Bartering is when, let's say, a person has carrots and another person has potatoes and they just switch. Okay? So you can have one object exchanged against another object. Or you can have someone saying, okay, you can weed my garden and in exchange I'll give you some apple pie. Okay? So that would be a service against a product. Or it could be a service against a service. You weed my garden and I'll go help you paint your barn. Okay? Now that's bartering. The problem is, let's say a lady has potatoes and another guy has carrots. Well, if one wants the carrots, but the other one doesn't want the potatoes, we're stuck. What do we do now? Well, let's say this one has carrots, this one has potatoes, so the carrots are going to go here, and the potatoes might go to another third person who's going to cut somebody's hair. You see, so it can start to work if you have several people that exchange between themselves. But how can this be organized if you have 10, 20, 100, or 1,000, or 1,000,000 people? Well, it can be organized through things that people have heard before, such as money. It could be organized through lets systems. We're going to talk about those soon. But it can also be organized through the game, and the easiest one to organize is the game. Now, basically, what is the game? The game is a type of money. And then you're going to ask me, what is money? Well, let me explain here. Money is a way out of the problem we have with bartering. With bartering, you have one person exchanging with another. Okay? With money, you have three things. Money allows it to be multilateral, which means with more than one person. Okay? Money can mean that it's deferred, which means it can be from one person to the next, but that allows the other person to take money and use another type of product. So it can be differed. It can be differed in time too, okay? Which means if I don't exchange carrots against potatoes now, I exchange carrots against money, then I can take money and use this later on for something else. So it's deferred in time. And lastly, it's usually written. It's written on what? It could be on paper. It could be written on metal. Okay, let's say you have a coin, for example, and on a coin it will be written, this is worth 5 cents or €1. Or it could be the same on a piece of paper. So money is always the same thing. It's multilateral exchange, it's deferred in time, and it's written down on something. So as you'll see soon, the game is a type of money. All right, so what is the game? The game is a type of money, and the type of money that the game is very different from the type of money that we know. Let me finish this off here. Here we go. All right, the game it's a type of money, and let me see here, yes, the important thing, it's a self-managed money, self-managed, which means I don't have a government deciding to print some coin or to print some paper bills or pieces of paper or print or stamp some coins. What I have is a person, me, managing my own money. So it's self-managed and it's computable. Let me give you an example, okay? Let's say I have a house full of dollar bills. My house is full. If I open the door, the dollar bills flow out, okay? I bet you that somebody with a house full of money wouldn't know how many pieces of money or how many bills they have. So it's not computed, okay? The game is always computed all the time. So it's a computable type of money that is self-managed. Computed means that I always know exactly the amount of game points that I have. So it's a computable, self-managed type of money, okay? All right, it's a sovereign money. Why? Because I'm the one who's taking care of it. It's self-managed, so I don't depend on a government or any type of external authority to organize the game for me, to organize my own game. It is a true exchange too, okay? I exchange, let's say, a bag of organic carrots for some game points. And those game points then I can use later for something else. So it's basically time against time or time against products. But the fact that it's organized, it's computable, means that I can make sure that whatever I give in product or service, I get back later, okay? So it is a true exchange. And it's a responsible exchange. It's self-managed, and I'm responsible for making sure that the game stays a true and fair exchange system. It's also a universal exchange. Why? Because it's based on time, as you'll see in a few minutes. Based on time means that if I'm in China, Russia, or anywhere in the world, basically, I can use the game wherever I go. For example, this summer I went to Italy, to Switzerland, to France, and I did a whole bunch of transactions, or a whole bunch of exchanges through the game. Okay, all right. Now, what are the advantages of the game? The fun thing is it enriches the community. Okay? For example, let's say that I'm in a community and the dollar crashes tomorrow. We're in Canada here, in Quebec. All the banks are closed, all the doors are closed, like what happened in Argentina, in Greece, or other countries such as Turkey. And the dollar bill is not worth anything anymore. Now, what do? Well, I can still do things for people. I can still get products or services, either offer them or get them through the game. So it's really easy to organize the game, and it enriches the community right away. What's the history of the game? Well, it was invented by a Frenchman called Daniel Farjas in 1998 in France. This guy was a member of Let's, a local, let me see if I can explain, local exchange and trading system. It was a system invented in Canada that went all around the world, the Let's. And Daniel Farjas was a member of the Let's for many, many years. And there are certain things he just didn't like about the Let's. And he said, boy, there must be a way to invent a system of exchange or some type of exchange or money that would be self-managed so that every person is responsible for their own wealth. And he's the one who invented the game. Okay? He invented it in French. It's called a jeu in French. Okay, jeu for jardin d'échange universel, which means garden of universal exchange. And surprisingly, in English, it's almost the same. Okay, the game is the garden for all manner of exchange, almost the same as in French. All right, what happened? Well, in 1999, someone from Quebec went to France and found out about the game and brought the game back to Quebec. And in Quebec, it started going around. Now, what's the characteristic of the game? One of the main things to remember is that, remember we said it was based on time? Well, simply enough, one game point is worth 1 minute. Easy enough. Let me finish here. Oh yeah, there's one thing that's kind of cute. A little while ago, I was giving conferences about the game and stuff, and I said, well, it's too bad that, you know, when we talk about euros, we go like this, and when we talk about dollar bills, either in US or Canada, we use the S with the line across. I said, we need a little symbol for the game. And I just came across something, and I can present it to you now. I've been using it, and it's kind of fun. Since the game is a universal system, it gives me infinite possibilities. So I decided to use the infinity sign. And since most monies usually have 1 or 2 lines across, okay, I decided to put a line across. So this became my own personal symbol for the game point. And it's starting to be used right now around my community. It's kind of easy and it's fun because we're reminded every time we do that little sign, we're reminded of the fact that the game is an infinite game. It's an infinite type of game because it allows me to have infinite types of products and services. All right. Let me go on to the next part. Now, how does the game work? Sorry. Well, it's a system where we count things in points. So every time, for example, let's say I decide to do translation, because that's one of the things that I offer in the game is translation from French to English or English to French. So what do? I tell you, okay, you've got something for me to translate. It's going to take me X numbers of hours, okay? So we can think in time. How long is it going to take me? And remember, the game is based on time. So 1 game point is worth 1 minute, right? So 60 game points is worth 60 minutes. So 60 game points is worth 1 hour. Now, if I work for you for 1 hour, let's say I'm weeding the garden with you. Well, weeding the garden is not something that demands a lot of concentration. It doesn't demand a lot of skills. All I have to know is which plants to pull out, because sometimes if I pull out the radish plants, then you'll be angry because I would have weeded your garden too well, okay? So it doesn't demand a lot of skills. Most of the time, if I weed your garden, I'll ask you for 1 hour, I'll ask you 60 points. But if I do translation for you, well, I need special programs for translation, special dictionaries that I bought and put in my computer. I need a computer for it. I need some skills that are specialized. So I might ask you more. Most of the time when I'm translating, I'll ask people 120 points per hour. Now you're going to tell me, well, that's not fair. I don't like systems where people get paid more than others. Okay? The problem with this is we've had systems before in Quebec where everybody had the same salary, okay? Or everybody had the same remuneration for 1 hour, for example. The problem with that is that you get a lot of people doing little dicky jobs, but as soon as you start having jobs that are more, demand more money, more concentration, more skills, for example, someone who's good in electricity or plumbing or dentistry or translation or any other type of thing, or special massage, they would tend not to use the game or another exchange system if they have the same amount of remuneration or the same exchange as someone who's babysitting a kid or weeding a garden, for example. Okay? So we've discovered with time that people that demand to have the same remuneration or the same exchange for X numbers of hours for all types of different jobs, that most of the time people quit those systems. We've decided in the game the best thing is to leave people to self-manage, to allow them to be self-managed, which means, let's say I do a bargain with Diane, then we decide, Diane and myself decide how many points we're going to be asking. Let's say Diane, for example, let's say I'm asking her to help me paint my garage. Well, Diane is not a painter, so I'll ask her, let's say it takes an hour. I'll give her 60 points. But if I'm asking her to do something fancy, like for example, taking a movie from the internet and putting it on a DVD disc, and she's got all kinds of programs for that and all kinds of expertise, she will ask me more points. She might ask me 120 points if it takes her an hour. Some other people might ask for 200 points. A friend of mine who's a dentist might ask for 500 points for an hour. Do you think that's fair? Well, I don't know, a dentist who has to pay for machinery, an office, a secretary, whatever else, people that have more expenses, of course, naturally, it makes sense to ask more points per hour. So as you see, it always depends on what the person's needs are. It has to be a fair exchange. And there's also something else. If Diane is asking me, let's say, 200 points per hour for a job, I can say yes, or no? If I say no, well, she's stuck because now she can't do the job. She won't have the points. So we're going to come to an agreement. Hey, what do you say, Zian? Maybe if I offer you 150 points instead. And you see, we can bargain until we find a place where it sounds fair for both of us. We were saying that it's important that when a contract happens between two people, when we do a transaction, the transaction has to be very clear. Basically, whenever I'm asking, let's say, Diane to help me weed my garden, for example, basically, we agree to something. So it's called a contract. Okay? It's a verbal contract. And what we do is every time we have a contract, we have to make sure that the consent is voluntary and informed. If I come to Diane and I look at her like this and say, you better say yes, then it's not, the consent is not voluntary. I'm forcing her, okay? So the consent has to be voluntary for both sides, both parties. The conditions have to be clear. What happens in the game often is that people say, oh yes, I'll go weed your garden with you. It'll be fun. But I'm expecting to be paid a certain number of points, for example, or receive a certain number of points as a thank you. Okay? But the other person didn't want to pay anything. She thought I was just coming to help her and chat. So the conditions were not clear. I consented, but the conditions were not clear. So in the game, we really insist on the fact that it's important when we're doing a transaction between two people that the consent be there, of course, but the conditions be clear in advance, okay, so that people are not disappointed. And that the compensation is fair and sufficient. So if you're weeding the garden with me, I might give you 60 points per hour. Okay? But if you're translating something for me, a very difficult text, well then maybe I'll be giving you more. Maybe we can bargain and I can offer you 200 points per hour in this case. But it's got to be something that's fair and sufficient. All right, one little thing that's important. See, this is one of the things that we use in a game is something called a game book. Here is one game book. Okay? It's a little book that looks like a bank book. And what we do is, you'll see in the camera a little bit here, is we write down transactions, okay? And we write down, I'll explain in a few minutes how this works, but we write the transaction always in the other person's booklet. So whenever, let's say Diane came and weeded my garden, when we're done, okay, we remember she's consented, we've agreed on the conditions and the compensation was fair. And at the end, after about 2 hours of weeding, I say, okay, now 2 hours at 60 points each, that's 120 points. Then I take her booklet and she takes mine. So I never write in my own booklet. And that's why when you look at my booklet, there's all kinds of handwritings, but there's never mine in it, okay? We'll come back to this in a minute. All right, one thing I want to mention before is, wait up for a second, is what happens if I'm exchanging a product? What do I do if I have a, let's say a bag of organic carrots? Organic carrots is not time. I'm not translating for 1 hour. I want a bag of carrots. How do I put carrots, how do I translate it into time? Well, there's a little trick we have. And it always depends on where you live. Okay, so what I'm going to explain now is good for Canada, and it's probably good for France because it's similar as far as the equivalence, but it might not be the same in the US or it might not be the same in China or Russia. Okay, this is how it works. We say in Canada, the minimum wage is around $10 an hour. Okay, so in this case, $10 for 1 hour is $10 for 60 points. Follow me, right? Which means $10 for 60 points means $1 equals approximately 6 points. There we go. So let's say I have organic carrots in my garden and I want to sell them to Diane. Okay? I'm going to say, okay, Diane, I went to the store, the local store, and for 5 pounds of carrots, organic carrots, it costs $7.